It's the 14th of October in Hallows Creek, New York, a town so small it appears on maps only as a hairline bend in the county road, a crease in the topographic grid that cartographers apparently felt obligated to acknowledge without exactly endorsing. The leaves have turned early this year. The maples along Route 9 have gone a deep arterial red that looks less like autumn and more like something leaking. And the light by 4 in the afternoon is already the color of old brass, already retreating, already deciding it has better places to be. The farmhouses out here sit apart from each other the way people sit apart from each other at funerals, close enough to observe, far enough to pretend they're not. Daniel Marsh pulled his car into the gravel drive of his mother's house at 3:30 and sat in the idling vehicle for longer than he intended. He told himself he was listening to the end of a podcast. He was not listening to the podcast. He was looking at the house. It was a colonial-style structure, built in 1971 by his father with the help of 2 cousins and a third man whose name Daniel had never learned. White clapboard siding, green shutters, a porch that listed slightly to the left like a tired shoulder. His mother had lived in it alone for 32 years following his father's departure, and had died in it 6 weeks ago, on a Wednesday morning, of a stroke that the doctors said was painless and instantaneous, and which Daniel chose to believe was both of those things. He was the only child. He was the executor. He had 40 days to sort her affairs and decide what to do with the house, and had taken 3 weeks of leave from his position as a structural engineer at a firm in Boston to get it started. He was 38 years old. He had not been inside this house in 11 years. He got out of the car. The key his mother's attorney had mailed him still worked. The door swung inward on hinges that needed oil, a long, low sound like an intake of breath. And the smell of the house reached him before anything else did. Dry wood and old paper, and something floral and synthetic that he eventually identified as the air freshener his mother had favored, now faded to a ghost of itself, present enough to be recognizable, but not enough to do the job it was designed for. Beneath it, something else, earthen, old. Daniel moved through the rooms methodically. He had promised himself he would be efficient about this. He had promised himself he would not be sentimental, which was the promise he made whenever he most expected to be. The house had 4 rooms on the ground floor and 3 above. His mother had, in her later years, stopped using the upper floor almost entirely and had slept in what had originally been the study, off the living room, where the stairs would be a risk. The furniture was unchanged from his childhood, the same brown velvet couch, the same particle board bookshelves bowing under the weight of decades of Reader's Digest condensed novels, the same oval braided rug in the center of the living room floor. The rug had faded to the color of a bruise at its edges. On the wall beside the kitchen door, the telephone. It was a wall-mounted rotary unit, cream-colored, the kind that had been installed sometime in the late 70s and never replaced because it worked, and his mother had been a woman who did not replace things that worked. The receiver hung in its cradle. The cord that connected it to the wall ran behind the baseboard and disappeared. Daniel looked at it for a moment the way you look at something you forgot was real, something you had filed away as memory and are mildly startled to find has physical ass. He had called the telephone company from Boston 2 weeks after the funeral, when the bills had started coming to his forwarding address. The landline account had been in arrears for 4 months. His mother had stopped managing her finances in the spring, before the stroke, and Daniel had paid the outstanding balance, and then, after a moment's thought, requested disconnection. There was no one to call on the line. He would handle everything else through his cell. The representative confirmed disconnection within 24 to 48 hours. That had been 3 weeks ago. Daniel looked at the telephone. The telephone did not look back at him. This was, he understood, what telephones did. They hung there, inert, until they were not inert, and there was nothing unusual about a disconnected phone except the disconnection, which was invisible and therefore impossible to verify by sight alone. he moved on. He unpacked his bag in the study, which would be his room, in the hospital bed that the home health agency had brought in during his mother's final months, and which still sat where they had left it, angled toward the window so she could see the backyard. He lay on it for a moment, testing its springs. It sagged in the middle with a practiced accommodation that suggested years of one particular body. He moved to the couch. He made dinner from what he'd brought: canned soup, crackers, a bottle of wine he opened with a corkscrew from the kitchen drawer that lived in the same drawer it had always lived in, and ate it in front of the empty fireplace and thought about nothing in particular. At 11:30, he washed the bowl, turned off the lights, lay down on the couch with a blanket over him, and was almost asleep when the phone rang.
The sound was wrong from the first ring. Not wrong in the way of an unfamiliar ringtone or a call at an unexpected hour. Wrong in the way of something that should not be producing sound anyway. The wrongness that belongs to machines that have been switched off and are nevertheless running. It was a rotary bell, a real mechanical bell, not a digital approximation of one. And it rang twice, stopped, rang twice more, and stopped again. Daniel sat up. He remained motionless on the couch in the dark for what might have been 30 seconds or 2 minutes. The house was silent. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, something moved in the leaves. Wind or an animal. The phone did not ring again. He got up and went to the kitchen and looked at the phone. It sat in its cradle as it had sat all evening. The digital display on the handset, his mother had at some point in the 90s replaced the rotary receiver with one that had a caller ID window, while keeping the wall-mounted base, a hybrid arrangement that would have struck a museum curator as historically incoherent, was dark. He pressed the button that illuminated the caller ID screen. One call logged. The number displayed was 518.
He looked at this for a while. He knew this number. He had known this number since he was 5 years old. He had recited it to teachers, to friends, to emergency contact forms. He had called it from dormitory payphones and airport terminal booths, and once from a hospital in Burlington, Vermont, when he was 23 and had broken his wrist and needed someone to know. 518-774-0093 was the number of this house, the number that 3 weeks ago had been disconnected. Daniel set the caller ID display down. He stood in the kitchen for a moment with his hands on the counter and looked at the dark window above the sink, which showed him nothing but his own face and the dim square of the room behind him. He was a rational person. He was an engineer. He worked daily with the problem of things holding together under load, the distribution of weight, the behavior of materials under stress, the gap between what a structure appears to be doing and what it is actually doing. There were explanations. Numbers took time to fully disconnect from carrier systems. Phantom signals, data echoes, the residual charge in copper lines. He had read about this, or something like it, in some context he could not quite reconstruct. He went to bed. He did not sleep for a long time. The second night.
On the third night, someone spoke. He had left the phone off the hook, a precaution that he recognized as irrational even as he took it. If the line was dead, an off-hook receiver should make no difference, but which satisfied something in him that was not interested in rational argument. At 11:58, he replaced the receiver in its cradle. He was not sure why he did this either. At midnight, it rang. He answered on the first ring. "Who is this?" he said. Not a question. The phrasing of someone who has already decided they want an answer more than they want to be frightened. The static came first. Then through the static,
like a shape emerging from fog, a sound that was unmistakably a voice, low and irregular, the cadence of someone speaking with effort, as though the words were being formed from a material that didn't quite want to be words. "Daniel," the voice said. He did not respond. "Daniel," the voice said again. And the thing that happened to him in the next moment was not fear, or not only fear, because fear has a quality of the unfamiliar, of the "this should not be," and what he felt was not that. What he felt was recognition. The voice was his own. Not a performance of his voice, not an impression. His own voice. His own register and cadence, and
He did not pull up the rug that night. He told himself he would do it in daylight, with coffee, as a deliberate and methodical investigation, rather than a panicked 3 a.m. excavation. He managed to maintain this position until approximately 2:15, at which point he moved the couch, rolled back the rug, and crouched on the bare floorboards with a flashlight. The boards were old-growth pine, nailed rather than glued, with gaps between them that had widened over the decades as the wood dried and shrank. Through the gaps, he could see the dirt beneath, the crawl space, dark, packed, dry. He put his ear to the widest gap. He heard nothing. Then he heard something, or felt something, a vibration rather than a sound, a frequency too low to be heard cleanly, the kind of thing you register in your chest rather than your ear. A pulse, irregular, like a signal, like something transmitting in a language he couldn't parse. He replaced the rug. He moved the couch back. He sat on the couch and did not sleep until the gray light of 5:30 began to bleed around the curtain edges. And even then he slept badly and dreamed of wire, copper wire, the kind that runs inside walls and beneath floors and under streets, connecting everything to everything else, carrying signals that are invisible until they arrive.
He found the phone company's records in the county clerk's office on the 4th day. He had gone there for a different reason, to find the deed to the house, which he needed for the estate, and had ended up, in the way that small inquiries often expand, in the basement archives with a county employee named Loretta, who had worked there for 19 years and knew where everything was. The telephone installation records for the house at 14 Birch Creek Road dated to 1972. The original installation had included 2 lines, 2 separate lines, he noted, for a house where only one line had ever existed in his memory, and the second line had been removed from service records in 1977. No reason given, just line 2, service discontinued. Equip retained at site. Equip retained at site, Loretta read, frowning at the ledger over the bridge of her reading glasses. That's unusual. Usually they'd come retrieve it. What does that mean? The equipment. In 77, they were still running copper to everything. The handset, the junction box, they'd normally come recollect. But if they left it, she turned the page, ran her finger down a column of entries. No retrieval record. They just left it. Where would it be? Wherever they installed it. She closed the ledger. In the wall, under the floor, wherever they ran the line. Daniel drove back to the house. He sat in the driveway for a while, as he had on the first day, and looked at the building. He was thinking about the 2-line installation. He was thinking about his mother, who had never mentioned a second line. He was thinking about the holes he had dug in the backyard when he was 7, and the thing that had made him dig them. A child's instinct, a wordless sense that the ground was keeping something.
He was thinking about 1977, which was the year his father left. He went inside and called his father's number. His father, Gerald Marsh, 74, living in a retirement community in Sarasota, Florida, a man Daniel spoke to 3 times a year, at intervals that coincided more with obligation than affection, answered on the 3rd ring, with the alert wariness of an old man who expects bad news.
Daniel? A pause. Is everything all right with the house? The house is fine, Daniel said. I want to ask you something. The telephone installation. When you built the house, did you run 2 lines? Silence. Not the silence of thinking, the silence of a decision being made. Dad, where did you find that? His father said. County records. Another silence. Longer. Daniel waited. You don't need to know about that, his father said finally. His voice had changed register, dropped into something quieter and more careful. That was a long time ago, and it doesn't matter anymore. What was the second line for? Daniel, tell me. A long breath on the other end, the sound of a man deciding how much to give up. It wasn't for anything. It was a mistake. Something your mother asked for and then asked me to take out. We had it in for less than a year. Why did she want it? She thought... He stopped, started again. She had an idea when she was pregnant that we should have a dedicated line, just for the nursery, in case something happened in the night and she couldn't get to the other phone fast enough.
He found his mother's journals on the 6th day in a shoebox in the back of the closet in the upper bedroom, the bedroom that had been his, that smelled of dust and old model cement, and a childhood he couldn't quite inhabit as memory because it was still too present in this room, in the particular height of the window and the particular angle of afternoon light that came through it. The journals were small, spiral-bound notebooks, the kind sold in packs of 3 at pharmacy checkout lines, and she had kept them for decades. 23 notebooks, spanning from 1969 to 2019, when the stroke had made writing difficult. He was not looking for anything. He read them because they were there, and because the alternative was to sit in the living room, above the thing under the floor, and wait for midnight. He found it in the second notebook, November 1971, 4 months before Daniel was born. Dr. Hennessy confirmed today. 2. He said 2, and I did not know what to do with the word. Gerald is wonderful. Gerald says it's twice the blessing. I keep thinking about space. The house is so small. But Gerald says we'll make it work, and I believe him. I always believe him. That is the problem. I have always been too quick to believe Gerald. He turned the page. December. Still 2. They are both alive. They move it.
March 19. They let me hold him before. The other one. The small one. He was... I don't want to write what he was. Gerald says I am not to speak of it to anyone. Gerald says it is better this way. Gerald says Daniel will never know, and it is better that he never knows. I do not know what I think. I think that Gerald is wrong about many things and right about very few, and I have never known the difference until after. He closed the notebook. He sat on the edge of the bed in his old room for a long time. The afternoon light came through the window at its particular angle and fell across the floorboards in a long trapezoid that slowly shifted as the sun moved. The small one, his mother had written, as though he had not had a name, as though naming him would have made him real in a way that could not be managed. Daniel went downstairs. He moved the furniture again. He rolled back the rug. He got the pry bar from his car. He had brought a basic toolkit, expecting the kind of maintenance problems that old houses accumulate, and he chose a board, and he worked the flat edge of the bar under it and pulled. The board came up with a shriek of nails and a release of air that smelled of deep earth, of cold and dark, and the particular mineral smell of places that have never seen light. He pulled up 2 more boards. Below them, in the crawl space, in the dark root-tangled earth that the house had been sitting on for 53 years. The handset. It was wrapped in oilcloth, tied with twine. Someone had placed it deliberately,
Not dropped, not forgotten, but placed, with the care of something meant to last. The cord ran from it into the earth at an angle, disappearing into the...
He put it to his ear. The static was immediate and total, so loud after the silence that he nearly dropped the receiver. And through the static, already there, already in progress, as though the conversation had been going on without him, and he had merely rejoined it by picking up the line. "I knew you'd find it," the voice said. His voice. The wrong version of his voice. "I've been waiting for you to find it." "Who are you?" Daniel said. He was surprised by how level his voice was. "You know who I am." "My brother," Daniel said. A pause, then something that might have been a laugh, if the voice had enough left in it for a laugh. "Brother," it said, trying the word. "That's one name for it. What happened to you? What happened?" The silence that followed was the longest one yet, and in it, something shifted in the static. The texture of it changed, the way the static had changed when he first spoke on the second night, but more profoundly now, the way a room changes when someone in it begins to cry. He could not have explained how he knew this. He knew it the way he knew his own breathing. "She kept the line," the voice said finally. Quiet, almost nothing. She kept it connected until she couldn't pay the bills. 30 years. She never called, but she kept it connected. Daniel said nothing. "She knew," the voice said again. "That's enough. That's..." And the static surged, a roar of interference like a wave breaking, and through it the voice, thinning. "That's more than I thought I'd get." "Wait," Daniel said. "What's your name? She didn't write..." He stopped. "She didn't write your name." The static, the long copper frequency, the buried wire running down into the dark beneath the house, carrying a signal across whatever distance exists between the living and the thing that is not quite either. "Thomas," the voice said. Barely. Like the last light from a star that burned out a long time ago, arriving finally at the eye that was waiting for it. She told Gerald. He made her stop saying it, but she told him first. The line went dead. Not the soft dead of a disconnected call, the absolute dead of something that has finished. Daniel sat on the floor of the living room for a long time, the handset in his lap, the boards open around him, the cold coming up from the earth. The sky outside went from black to the deep gray blue of pre-dawn, and the birds began, and the refrigerator hummed, and the house breathed around him with the particular respiratory rhythm of old wood and settled plaster. He replaced the handset in the hole, not in the oilcloth this time, just in the earth. He covered it with the boards. He did not nail them back down. He rolled the rug over them. He put the furniture back. He spent the following 3 days completing the estate work. The attorney, the bank, the realtor, who came on the second day and walked through the house with an assessment that was professional and compassionate, and which Daniel received without quite hearing it. He cleared his mother's personal effects. He kept the journals, all 23 of them. He kept the folder from the filing cabinet labeled telephone, MISC. On the morning he left, he stood in the kitchen for a moment before locking up. He looked at the wall-mounted telephone in its cradle. The caller ID window was dark. He thought about the second line, the nursery line, that his father had been asked to remove, and which the telephone company had removed but not retrieved. He thought about the way copper conducts, indiscriminately, across whatever distance, carrying whatever is given to it.
He thought about his mother's 30 years of bill payments on a line she never used, and what those payments meant, and what kind of love persists in the form of an open circuit, a door held ajar, a frequent
Silence. The true silence of a dead line. The silence of copper at rest, carrying nothing, waiting. "Thomas," he said. "Nothing. My name is Daniel Marsh. I'm your brother. I'm going to tell people about you." He stopped, corrected himself. "I'm going to tell my father about you. He needs to know that I know. And I'm going to put your name somewhere permanent. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'll figure it out." He paused again. "You're not nothing. You were never nothing. Whatever you are, wherever you are, you're not nothing." He set the receiver down in its cradle. He stood in the kitchen for a moment